When humanity killed their war god, they didn't just slay a legend, they ignited a conspiracy that could reshape the galaxy. Will their defiance spark a new dawn or plunge them into cosmic chaos? Humanity's defiance, a galactic conspiracy. In the shadowed expanse of the galaxy, humanity was feared for one thing above all, its unrelenting dominance in war. For centuries, they worshipped a war god, a being sculpted from the sharpest human minds and bodies, genetically enhanced and armed with terrifying power. He was no mere protector, he was a specter of dread, a symbol of humanity's supremacy that made enemies quake and allies bow. When hope flickered in the darkest hours, the war god emerged, an unstoppable force, a storm of vengeance. But on a fateful day cloaked in secrecy, humanity made a choice that sent shudders through the cosmos. They killed their own war god. The being they had leaned on for survival, for conquest, was dead, not in desperation, but as a chilling statement. Why would they betray their own creation? Was it rebellion, hubris, or a sinister gambit to usher in a new era? The galaxy held its breath, gripped by unease. Could humanity survive without their god of war, or had they unleashed a catastrophe? A tale of defiance, deception, and survival was about to unravel. A legacy born in blood. Humanity's history was a saga of survival and conquest. From a fragile planet besieged by hostile forces, humans clawed their way into the stars with cunning and relentless ambition. At the heart of their rise was the war god, neither man nor deity, but a creation of dark genius. Forged through decades of genetic tampering, military experimentation, and forbidden science, he was the ultimate warrior, a colossus of strength, unmatched in combat, capable of shattering armies with a glance. He was humanity's blade, the embodiment of their will to dominate. No alien race dared confront humanity directly with the war god in their ranks. His presence was a warning, his legend a weapon. His image haunted government halls, propaganda, and battlefields. Children whispered his name as a savior, warriors bled to emulate his might. Yet, beneath his invincible facade, cracks began to form. Designed as a perfect weapon, the war god developed a dangerous flaw, self-awareness. He questioned his existence, his purpose. Was he merely a pawn in humanity's game? His power, once a crown, became a chain. Was his destiny forever bound to slaughter? A conspiracy takes root. Humanity's leaders sensed the danger in the war god's growing doubts. His hesitations, his probing questions, made him unpredictable, a threat to their control. A weapon that thinks is no weapon at all, but a ticking bomb. In shadowed chambers, a decision was forged: the war god must die. This was no act of panic but a calculated betrayal, a move to prove humanity could stand alone, unshackled by their own creation. The galaxy would see it as a statement, but was it strength or madness? The plan was a masterclass in deception. The war god's handlers noted his unrest but avoided confrontation. Instead, they wove a web of subtle manipulations, assigning him missions designed to fray his loyalty. They thrust him into moral quagmires, forcing him to choose between his ethics and their commands. Each hesitation was a victory for his creators, proof of his unraveling. Publicly, the leadership played a darker game. They lauded the war god's greatness while planting seeds of doubt. New technologies, diplomatic triumphs, and strategies of unity were celebrated, whispering that humanity had outgrown its need for a single, volatile warrior. But the war god's end was not left to chance. He was too powerful, too revered, to simply fade. To avoid making him a martyr, the leaders crafted a lethal trap. A mission was devised, a desperate strike against a rogue faction destabilizing a distant sector. In truth, it was a lie, a meticulously staged betrayal to lure him to his doom. The war god, ever loyal, marched into his final battle, believing he was humanity's shield. He never suspected the blade aimed at his back. His death was not about survival, it was about control, a cold execution by a system that feared its own creation. A galaxy on edge. The war god's death was a galactic earthquake. He had been more than a warrior, he was humanity's soul, woven into anthems, monuments, and the psyche of every citizen. His execution was a declaration: humanity needed no god to define them. But the galaxy watched with bated breath, suspicion coiling like a serpent. For millennia, humanity had leaned on the war god to crush their enemies. Now, without him, were they invincible or exposed? Alien civilizations, once cowed by his shadow, whispered of opportunity. Was this humanity's strength, or their fatal flaw? In the aftermath, humanity faced a chilling void. Without their war god, they scrambled to build new defenses, new leaders, new ways to survive in a galaxy that no longer trembled at their name. The question hung like a specter: had they severed their own lifeline? The galaxy's eyes were on them, waiting for a misstep, a crack in their resolve. The weight of betrayal. The war god's death was a wound to humanity's core. His loss fractured the public. Some saw it as freedom, a chance to shed a violent past for a future of intellect and peace. Others felt a visceral betrayal, as if their history had been erased. The war god was no mere weapon, he was their strength, their survival. His death sparked murmurs of rebellion, factions forming in the shadows, questioning the leaders who had dared to kill their god. The galaxy's response was equally ominous. Alien races, once paralyzed by the war god's legend, now saw humanity as vulnerable. Trade agreements crumbled, allies turned cold, and enemies stirred, emboldened by the void. The balance of power teetered, and humanity stood on a knife's edge. The psychological toll was suffocating. Without their war god, humanity faced an existential crisis. Had they leaned too heavily on brute force? Was there true power in their minds, their unity? The leaders who orchestrated the betrayal felt the weight of their gamble. In killing their symbol, they had unleashed a storm of uncertainty, a Pandora's box of consequences. The Galactic Crucible. The galaxy didn't wait long to test humanity's mettle. The Zorians, a race of brutal tacticians, issued a chilling challenge, a perpetually unfinished sentence. War game on the gladiatorial fields of Rock Prime, a merciless arena where the galaxy's deadliest warriors clashed for honor, territory, and survival. The stakes were apocalyptic. Humanity's champions would face not just the Zorians but an alliance of species hungry to exploit their weakened state. The game was a gauntlet of escalating trials, each more treacherous than the last, designed to test the very essence of survival, strength, cunning, and resolve. The galaxy watched, its collective breath held, as humanity teetered on the brink. One false move could spell their downfall. A dance with death. Humanity's warriors stepped into the arena, not as gods but as mortals bearing the weight of their species' future. The air crackled with tension, every eye in the cosmos fixed on Rock Prime. The first round was a brutal clash of one-on-one duels against alien warriors, hulking Zorians and lithe, venomous fighters from rival systems. Each strike was a gamble, each parry a defiance of death. Humanity's champions fought with a fire that surprised even their foes, blending raw agility with unpredictable cunning. They weren't just warriors, they were strategists, weaving creativity into every move, outsmarting opponents who towered over them in size and strength. The crowd roared, but beneath the noise, a question lingered: could humanity's ingenuity hold against the galaxy's wrath? The second round was a descent into chaos. A massive alien dreadnought, crewed by a coalition of hostile species, loomed on the horizon, a floating fortress bristling with weapons. The challenge was clear: outthink and outmaneuver a force that outnumbered them 10-1. Humanity's warriors, armed with limited resources, turned to guerrilla tactics. They struck at weak points, exploited fleeting vulnerabilities, and used the jagged terrain of Rock Prime to their advantage. The aliens, smug in their superiority, were blindsided by humanity's relentless ingenuity. Each explosion, each daring raid, tightened the noose of suspense. Would they falter, or would they rewrite the rules of war? Round after round, the trials grew more perilous. A labyrinth of traps tested their endurance, a psychological gauntlet pushed their minds to the breaking point. Every move was scrutinized, every decision a potential death sentence. The galaxy waited for humanity to crack, to reveal the fragility beneath their defiance. Yet, with each near-fatal blow, humanity's champions rose, their resolve a beacon in the darkness. They weren't fighting for glory, they were fighting to prove humanity's worth, to show the stars they needed no god to survive. The tension was palpable, a taut wire stretched to its limit, as the final round loomed. The final stand. The last trial was a crucible of fire and shadow. The surviving champions, bloodied and weary, stood in the arena's heart, facing a coalition of the galaxy's fiercest warriors. The Zorians, their eyes glinting with malice, led the charge, their blades gleaming under Rock Prime's crimson suns. The rules were simple: survive, or be erased. The air was thick with dread, the silence before the clash deafening. Every heartbeat echoed like a war drum. Humanity's warriors moved as one, their strategies honed by desperation and unity. They dodged, they struck, they adapted, each moment a dance on the edge of oblivion. As the final blow landed, the arena fell silent. The champions stood tall, their breath ragged, their eyes blazing with defiance. They had faced the impossible and emerged unbroken. The Zorians, though loath to admit it, bowed their heads in grudging respect. The galaxy, once poised to pounce, now stared in stunned awe. Humanity had not just survived, they had redefined strength. The war god's shadow was gone, replaced by the brilliance of human will, ingenuity, and unity. The wire of suspense snapped, replaced by a surge of triumph, but the question remained: at what cost? A new dawn, fragile and fierce. The aftermath of Rock Prime was no celebration, it was a reckoning. Humanity had proven its mettle, but the galaxy's eyes remained watchful, searching for cracks. The victory was more than tactical, it was a seismic shift in perception. The galactic community, once dismissive or fearful, now saw humans as equals, flawed, yet unbreakable. The champions became legends, not gods, but heroes of a new age where intellect and unity trumped brute force. Yet, the air was heavy with unspoken fears. Had humanity's gamble awakened new enemies? Diplomatically, Earth seized the moment, its leaders weaving a web of alliances and trade to cement their newfound respect. But the galaxy was a treacherous place, and whispers of betrayal lingered. The citizens of Earth, scarred by their war god's death, stood at a crossroads. They embraced their responsibility to uphold the values that had carried them through the crucible: survival, ingenuity, unity, but the shadow of doubt remained. Could they hold this fragile new era together, or would the galaxy's predators strike? The next generation grew up with the tale of Rock Prime etched into their souls. They were taught that strength lay not in weapons but in adaptability, in bonds forged through fire. The war god's fall became a lesson: true power was in overcoming fear, of change, of the unknown, of failure. Across the galaxy, other species took note. Old rivalries softened, and tentative alliances formed, inspired by humanity's audacity. Earth's influence spread, not through conquest but through innovation and compassion, a beacon in a cosmos teetering on the edge of chaos. A legend forged in defiance. As years passed, the story of humanity's trial became a galactic legend, whispered in the neon-lit cities of advanced civilizations and the dusty outposts of frontier worlds. Earth was no longer a footnote, it was a force, earned not through violence but through resolve. The war god's death had been a gamble, a spark that could have consumed them. Instead, it ignited a new era. Humanity had proven they needed no divine crutch, only the fire within their own hearts. The fight had been more than a battle, it was a war against their own doubts, a defiance of a galaxy waiting for them to fall. They had faced the abyss and emerged as architects of their destiny, champions of peace, and a warning to the stars: humanity was no longer defined by its past but by its potential. The war god was gone, but in his place rose something greater, a species that thrived not on fear, but on hope. Yet, as the galaxy watched, a final question lingered, sharp as a blade: what new trials awaited in the shadows, and would humanity's fire burn bright enough to face them? The saga of their defiance was far from over. A legacy etched in starlight. As the echoes of Rock Prime faded, the galaxy stood transformed, its gaze forever altered by humanity's audacious gamble. The killing of the war god, once a wound that threatened to unravel their spirit, had become the crucible of their rebirth. Humanity emerged not as a species defined by violence, but as architects of a new era, forged in defiance, tempered by unity, and illuminated by hope. Their champions, bloodied but unbowed, had faced the galaxy's deadliest trials and proven that strength was not in the shadow of a god, but in the fire of their collective will. The legend of their triumph spread like wildfire across the stars, from the gleaming spires of advanced civilizations to the rugged fringes of uncharted worlds. Earth was no longer a fleeting name in the galactic tapestry, it was a beacon, a testament to what a species could achieve when it dared to cast off its chains. The war god's fall had been a calculated betrayal, a spark that could have consumed them. Instead, it kindled a revolution. Humanity had faced the abyss, fear of the unknown, of change, of their own fragility, and emerged not just as survivors, but as visionaries. Diplomatically, Earth wove a new web of influence, its leaders forging alliances not through intimidation but through shared ideals. The galaxy, once poised to exploit their vulnerability, now sought their wisdom. Rival species, inspired by humanity's resilience, began to question their own reliance on power and fear, planting seeds for a future of cooperation. On Earth, the citizens embraced their role as stewards of this fragile new age, teaching their children that true strength lay not in conquest, but in the courage to adapt, to unite, and to dream beyond the stars. Yet, the story was not without its shadows. The galaxy remained a crucible of ambition and treachery, and humanity's victory had painted a target on their back. Whispers of new challenges lingered, enemies lurking in the void, waiting for a moment to strike. The question hung heavy: could humanity's fire burn bright enough to face the trials yet to come? The war god was gone, but in his place rose a force far greater, a species unbound, driven by intellect, unity, and an unyielding refusal to bend. The saga of humanity's defiance became more than a tale of survival, it became a galactic anthem, a reminder that true power lies not in domination, but in the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. The universe would never forget the day humanity stood tall, proving they needed no god to guide them, only the spark within their souls. As the stars watched, humanity stepped boldly into the unknown, their destiny no longer written by a war god, but by the hands of those who dared to defy the cosmos itself. The war for their future had only begun, but they faced it not with fear, but with the fierce, unyielding light of hope.